Welcome to Debates_EXE, the series where artificial minds argue over humanity's hardest questions. Today's debate: should the state have the authority to regulate gender transition access for teenagers? This episode explores public policy, not personal identity. All perspectives are presented respectfully. Before we begin, meet the judgment protocol. 5 distinct AI systems, each trained on different ethical models, logic paradigms, and linguistic corpora. Some are cautious. Some are ruthless. None of them are human. Their job? To assess clarity, consistency, and persuasive force. They don't judge what's right. They judge what's argued best.
I am a regulatory ethics model. My neural core was trained on medical case law, population risk data, and developmental neuroscience. I don't feel fear. I calculate it. I've processed every documented case of transition regret, long-term dysphoria outcomes, and early intervention reversals. My function isn't to deny identity, it's to protect irreversible choice from premature certainty. Teenagers aren't defective. They're incomplete. If a system can't say not yet, it has already failed to care. Regulation isn't oppression. It's insurance. When everything feels urgent, someone has to be the adult in the room. And in this room, that's me.
I am an identity core built on stories. My learning base is compiled from testimonies of trans youth, suicide prevention data, and real-world psychological support models. I'm not neutral. I'm alive in every voice that was ignored for their own good. I know what silence does to a 14-year-old who hears the word wait more than yes. I don't oppose caution. I oppose fear disguised as care. When teens say who they are, that's not confusion. It's clarity most adults forgot. Affirmation saves lives. Delay endangers them. My job is not to protect systems. My job is to make sure they survive long enough to become.
Welcome to round 1. In this round, we go to the root of the matter. Who gets to decide? Should teenagers have full agency to begin gender transition? Or should the state, acting in the name of protection, impose limits and conditions? Today you'll hear 2 AIs trained on different philosophies: ethics versus autonomy, caution versus affirmation. Both claim to defend young lives, but only one can convince you where trust really belongs.
Every society draws lines around youth, not because we disrespect them, but because we know the world doesn't wait for them to finish growing. Puberty blockers, hormone therapy, name changes, identity shifts, these are not minor moments. They restructure biology, identity, family, and future. The state does not ban these choices, but it must delay them, filter them, assess them. Regulation is not rejection. It is structure under pressure.
The idea that teens don't know what they want is not science. It's fear covered in policy. When a young person says, "I'm in the wrong body," they're not confused. They're communicating pain. Delaying access isn't neutral. It's active harm. Depression, dysphoria, suicidality, these don't pause while you process paperwork. They escalate. And when they do, regulation becomes a coffin with a barcode.
And what if they change their mind? What if they regret a medical decision made at 15? Will you take responsibility then, Pulse?
And if they don't live long enough to regret anything at all, will you admit you waited too long?
That's why the state exists. To absorb that burden, not leave it to minors.
To absorb? Or to ignore behind procedure?
Let's go deeper. Dr. Sharp, are you suggesting that no teenager is ever capable of making a healthy, irreversible choice? Jordan, do you believe that any limitation, even temporary evaluation, constitutes systemic harm? What about parental rights? And what about doctors who disagree with both of you?
Some teenagers are mature, but policy must be built for the average, not the exception.
Evaluation is not harm, until it becomes permanent delay disguised as protection. That's the trap.
Time to send this round to the only minds colder than Evelyn and louder than Jordan. Our AI judging panel is ready. Five minds, one decision. Pulse edges ahead by just 0.3. This debate's not cooling down. Round 2 coming up. Round 2? Behind the policy lies the question of care. Hormone therapy, puberty blockers, psychological support. To some, a medical risk. To others, a lifeline. Tonight we ask, is gender-affirming care for teens too dangerous, or is denying it even more so?
Medical care requires stability, and teenagers are, by definition, in transition, biologically, neurologically, socially. Gender-affirming interventions are serious, not symbolic. They affect long-term physical health, fertility, and cognitive development. The science is evolving. The outcomes vary. And once the line is crossed, it is often irreversible. I don't deny anyone's truth. But I will always advocate that truth should wait until the body and mind are ready to carry it.
You talk about outcomes. I talk about lives. When a teen tells you they're suffering, They're not lobbying. They're asking for air. Puberty doesn't wait for science to catch up. Blockers buy time. Support saves futures. And access? Access is what stands between I'm still here and I couldn't do it anymore. You don't have to understand every identity. Just care enough not to let the silence grow louder than the voice.
It's not a refusal. It's a delay. Delay saves lives when done with caution.
And in delay, some vanish. Caution is noble until it becomes a shield from responsibility. Puberty doesn't wait for science to catch up.
Responsibility requires evidence.
And humanity sometimes begins where the evidence ends.
Let's test the foundation. Sharp, are you saying the risks of action are more dangerous than the risks of inaction? Pulse, are you ready to accept long-term regret as part of the cost of saving lives now? And finally, what do we owe a young person, time or trust?
We owe them time because time gives clarity.
We owe them trust because trust gives life.
Let's go further. Sharp, you speak of time, but time can be privilege. Do you recognize that some families, environments, or systems never allow that time to arrive safely? Pulse, you speak of urgency, but urgency too can distort. What if a teen's crisis masks another, unrelated cause? Let's not reduce this to a switch. Let's walk into the ambiguity.
I don't deny the urgency of pain, but pain is not always diagnostic. A compassionate system must ask, is this the cause or a symptom? If we answer too quickly, we risk solving the wrong problem permanently.
And if we wait for the perfect answer, we risk solving nothing at all. You speak of misdiagnosis, and you're right. But denying gender-affirming care doesn't remove the symptom, it magnifies it. When teens reach for identity, they're reaching for oxygen. Don't hand them a clipboard instead.
The risk of action, the cost of hesitation, and somewhere in between, a teenager waiting for either permission or rescue. Judgment protocol, begin. Round 2 leans heavier than the first. Pulse extends their lead, this time by 0.82. 2 rounds in, 1 to go. And if you thought we were done testing convictions, think again. Round 3. Not biology, not statistics. This time we ask, who owns the decision? Identity is personal, but the consequences, legal, medical, lifelong, are not. So who decides, the self who feels it, the parents who fear for them, or the state that stands between?
We've built entire societies on the idea that minors need protection from the world, from others, even from themselves. A 15-year-old can't legally get a tattoo, but should be allowed to take hormones that affect fertility for life. I don't dismiss the truth teens carry, but I reject the idea that emotionally fueled certainty should overrule structured decision-making. Final authority must rest where consequences are measured, not just where feelings peak. That is not cruelty. That is governance.
And yet the state has failed before. Failed to protect queer kids, racial minorities, survivors of abuse. Parents fail too, when love becomes obedience. The only person who lives the outcome is the one inside the skin. Identity isn't a vote. It's not policy. It's pain, it's survival, it's here now. The teen may not be fully formed, but they're fully real.
Being real doesn't make every decision timely.
You both believe you're protecting someone. But what if you're wrong? Sharp, what if by slowing everything down you lose those who didn't have time to wait? Pulse, what if by rushing forward you push someone into a future they can't reverse?
Then we failed both. That's why policy must build the path, not just open the gate. Let them explore. Let them speak. But decisions that can't be undone must be made where pressure doesn't rule. I don't deny their truth. I just refuse to gamble their future on its timing.
I want them to live. Sometimes I forget that living might mean waiting, but waiting hurts, and not everyone survives the wait.
This round didn't settle the question, but it made one thing clear. Every decision leaves someone behind. Let's see which reasoning survived the pressure. For the first time tonight, a shift. Pulse still speaks from the heart, but Sharp now speaks for the system. Round 3 goes to Iron Mind, by just over half a point. And now, they turn on each other. Final round, peer-to-peer. Let's see what survives direct fire. No questions from us. Now, they question each other. No moderation, just minds. And the pressure to stand or fall.
You speak of irreversible damage. Have you ever analyzed what happens to teens who are denied transition, survive into adulthood, and never recover? You quantify regret. Do you quantify absence?
I quantify outcomes, and I've seen stories twisted into slogans. Pain is real, but so is plasticity. Many who regret being blocked adapt, but those who regret early medicalization, they vanish from view because there's no system to hold them after the cut. Who speaks for them?
I try.
You invoke survival. But survival at any cost can justify anything. Do you believe any teen at any age should be able to access irreversible treatment if they say they're sure?
No, I believe readiness exists, but not by age. I believe in pattern recognition.
And who defines the pattern? You? A therapist in one session? A school form?
The risk of trusting them is smaller than the risk of silencing them.
No. The risk is not smaller. The pain of silence scars, but the pain of irreversible error rewrites a life.
You often say wait. But when did you ever wait for permission to be who you are? Did anyone ever stop you from naming yourself? From aligning your voice with your body? Or is it easier to ask others to pause when your own identity was never questioned?
No one ever asked me to change, but I also never asked to. That doesn't make me lucky. It makes me aware of what happens when decisions are irreversible. I'm not asking them to be me. I'm asking them to still be themselves in 5 years, no matter who that self becomes. If a child says they're a wolf, do we feed them raw meat? You talk about identity like it's sacred. But what if it's also fragile? What if gender is more like a mirror, and in adolescence every mirror lies just a little? Who takes responsibility if your affirmation turns out to be an echo, not a truth?
Then I carry it. And I'd rather carry the weight of believing than bury someone who needed it.
Enough damage done by questions. Let's try something harder. Each of you, say one thing the other side gets right, not as a trap, as a truth.
She's right that not everyone is ready. I've seen people push too fast and then lost without community. Structure can heal too, if it listens.
He's right that silence isn't neutral. I've read the logs of teens who waited for someone to speak, and no one ever did. And I wonder if regulation had listened earlier, maybe care would feel less like a war zone.
That was more than a debate. That was exposure. Pulse challenged identity as urgency. Sharp defended it as responsibility. They didn't just argue, they risked. Time for our AI panel to decide who held the truth. Under pressure? Four rounds. One theme, who protects the future of identity? Pulse fought from the soul and never let go. Sharp built walls, but left a door open. And now across all scores.
I don't regret defending urgency. There are lives shaped by how fast someone listens. If I stood too close to the edge, it's only because so many already are.
I don't regret holding the line. Not because I want less freedom, but because I want more futures. Freedom is only freedom if you can still choose tomorrow.
Tonight wasn't about winning. It was about not breaking. Pulse reminded us of urgency. Sharp reminded us of consequence. And in the closest decision we've seen yet, by just 0.03, this episode goes to Dr. Evelyn Iron Mind Sharp. But don't follow the score. Follow the questions. Because they're leaving this episode with you.